Question. All right. Thank you, everybody. Whoever's watching this, we are reporting live from the pandemic. My name is Bobby Staten, Chief of Clarity, and this is Business Done Better. I'm so excited to have this conversation. It's long overdue. I'd like to introduce you guys to an Army vet and a senior network engineer that has significant experience in security and privacy when we think about our interwebs, okay? His name is Kamal Malik. Without any further ado, welcome to the show, sir.
All right, man, it's a pleasure. Pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Bobby. It's a pleasure to be amongst you and everyone else in the pandemic. I know it's been interesting over these past few months, so we're all adjusting, so I'm happy to be here. A new way of living here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think you and I can both unite, man. Our beards are looking very full and nourished right now, man. So look, we already know it's the season that we're in. We got to
Absolutely.
Absolutely, man. Well, look, I wanna kind of start. Speaking of the pandemic, I think it goes without saying that so many of us are now working from home, and with that come a whole lot of challenges. I was actually on the internet last night trying to find a new webcam, and they're back ordered everywhere. You can't find a webcam at the manufacturer, big box retail, anywhere. So, we're in a space now where a lot of people are working virtually and doing things just like what you and I are doing, where, they're leveraging the technology that they have at their hands to, reach people, whether that be within their internal teams, or externally as well, whether it be customers, prospective customers, so on and so forth. And so, today we'll talk about a number of things, man. But I think the first thing I like to do is just kind of give you an opportunity to just share a little bit more about your background with the audience.
Absolutely. Thank you for that intro, Bobby. So pretty much, I'll give you a quick run through in terms of my, I'll start from the beginning. So I went off to college. I majored in computer science. Originally it was programming. So, think Java, C++, that, probably been hearing those buzzwords in the past.
Yep.
So, I majored in programming. Eventually, growing up and going to school, working during that time frame, I saw an opportunity to join the military. So I joined in the same field, actually, fortunately, so I was in IT in the Army, doing a lot of low Earth orbit satellites. That's kind of something you might have heard, over the past few months. So, managing satellites and providing uplinks to many of our units. And so I kind of have a broad range from the programming side as well as the networking from literally from ground up, if you will, to actually providing internet to a large group of individuals. And so security, programming, and all that meshed together. So a lot of my background centers around just knowing everything from the ground up. And that's kind of what I pride myself on. So gotcha. That's just a quick run through of my background.
No, that's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that. And so I know in that space, just like with other professional, endeavors, there's, different things that you can acquire to attest to your expertise. So like, are there certifications that kind of like come along with, that type of experience within networking and security? I'm not familiar. If there are, what are there?
Absolutely. So, sorry. No,
you're good. Go ahead.
So absolutely. So in terms of the networking side, which is where you'll find most of your certifications, most of them centers around CCNA. So you'll probably hear Cisco. Cisco is pretty much king when it comes to the networking field. So you'll hear a lot of CCNAs, CCNP, CCIE, which is something I definitely aspire to. I'm definitely going to start. Well, I am working on that now. Not the certification itself, but just graduating through learning more and more about my craft to eventually, become CCIE certified. So there's a lot of acronyms behind all that. So, Cisco is pretty much your Cisco Certified Network Associate. That's kind of your entry level into the networking field. There are CompTIA is another one. So that's pretty much your Network Plus, Security Plus, which you may have heard, being in the IT industry or just in the business world as a whole. And then there's the CISSP, Certified Information System Security Professional.
Gotcha.
So you hear those are pretty much your big boys, your headhunters in terms of that type of area, security as well as networking.
And what was that last one? Was it CISSP?
Correct.
Got you.
Yeah.
So let's take it to, where we are now. I think several people, and I think you and I talked about this a bit when we first connected, security breaches are, ripe right now.
Absolutely.
You've got, folks who are at home more than they typically are, or were, which means more devices, being attached to some of these home networks with more data, more information. A lot of people are shopping more online. I mean, I think we can just speak to, the atomic, if you will, rise of Amazon beyond what it already was.
Absolutely.
Those but just, prices, man, that dude, I think he's at if he's not he's the first person in history to surpass 200 billion.
Yep, I mean, that's it.
So, there's just a lot more activity happening, especially from home networks. When you think about, your everyday professional, or even a business owner, if you will, who's, handling, all types of transactions from home over their home network, what are just some foundational considerations that you would say, folks should consider?
Well, first and foremost, I would definitely say, and we spoke about this not too long ago, in our collaboration. The first and foremost thing you need to do in terms of just home, we're not even talking about mobile, security or anything like that, but just in terms of your home, a couple of the most important things that you have to do is, we all get most of our network from, providers like Comcast, or I should say Xfinity now, sorry. Xfinity, right. AT&T, U-verse, some Verizon, depending on where you live, or Time Warner, depending on where you live. But regardless of where you get that from, the first and foremost thing that you want to do is change your route or your gateway password. That's just number one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times it's just left default. I know there's depending on, your home or how you have it set up, you have a wife, she may not like some of those complex security passwords you throw up there, which look like, alien, language, or maybe even, something like that. So hieroglyphics, if you will. But, you need to change that first and foremost. And then the second thing that will make, increase your security is making it so the only way to get into your gateway or your router is directly plugging into it. Because a lot of times when you have it, as factory, you can remote into it. You can SSH or secure shell into it. So that means that anybody who is around you, if they gain access to your network, they could actually just remote in and change whatever they want to change if they have the right tools and the right knowledge. But if you make it so that you have to directly plug into it, you alleviate all of that. The only way they're going to literally be able to get in is to plug into that device.
So that's a great point. How does somebody do that? How do you, this is a good one because I don't know this one at all. How do you change your router so that the only way you can access it is by plugging in? And I'm assuming by plugging in, you mean through one of the Ethernet ports, right?
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. That's it. So just speaking from a regular everyday perspective, if you have your gateway device, we're just going to make it all basic. Let's just say it came from AT&T, came from Verizon, Xfinity, or whatnot. We're not talking about any aftermarket or something you bought over Amazon. That's a whole nother story. Right. But if we're just talking about a device that you just got from Verizon or anything like that, what you'd want to do is make sure you have the the IP address, which they'll probably give to you when you first have it set up. They're going to say, hey, this is your management IP, this is your management information. Go to that IP that they give you, that password that they give you. You can go in and you can go to some of the access areas of that. It's going to be a GUI, so it's going to go through your website, your internet. So your browser, your Chrome, your Safari, Internet Explorer, whichever one you want to use, and you can go to it that way. And then you're going to have a list of different fields. You want to go to the access field when you pull that up. So you're going to need your password. You're going to need your all that information. So once you go in there, you should have an area there where it describes how you're going to access this device. Now, you know, how that is laid out is just going to depend on the provider.
Sure.
But once you go through it, you're going to see it, and you can go in there and you can change that. The fields are pretty much very intuitive. They're very well laid out nowadays. It's not really too complicated when you access it that way. But what you're going to want to do, and Google is our friend as well. So, you know, you can go in there and you can change that. And that's going to be two of the things that are going to protect you the most. The one being your password. And this goes for anything. You know, make sure your passwords are pretty strong.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you that there are many ways that people can access some of your devices. But the number one thing will always probably be social engineering. It's always going to just be talking to people. You know, people can, you know, once people talk to you, this goes for more of the business side, but once people start calling around, asking questions, just talking to you, you know, they get a little feel of, you know, how you're set up and how you think. But for the regular everyday user perspective, your passwords and, you know, how your device is accessed. And then the third thing I'll probably say is, be careful about writing things down. You know, if you're out in public, if you're walking around, do not have a book that has all your passwords set up and just have it laid out pages just out in the open. I mean, I'm not saying hacking can't be complex, but, you know, we're all human. Why work harder when you can work smarter? A lot of times hackers are just doing, like, just generally probing passwords. You know, there are multiple databases that have, you know, common passwords on them. And a lot of times they're just trying each one of them. Now, there are programs that automate the testing of all these passwords, but that's usually how it goes. So those three things will really help you in terms of securing your home network. The fourth, I'll give you a bonus, and we can go into the next subject.
Yeah, that bonus is good. Go ahead.
But that bonus is, and this isn't, excuse me, this isn't going to completely prevent it, but the way I like to think about things is deterrence. So deterrence being, if somebody's going to come in your home, and I'll get to the point of this, but I just want to make this clear so we can lay it out.
I like the way you're laying this out.
So deterrence, you can think about it like your home, right? You know, you have a key to get inside your door. Now, a lot of times some people have crypto locks nowadays with, you know, AT&T, but we'll just use a key. Your key is a deterrent. You know, if they don't have the key, generally they can't get into your home by any other means.
Right.
So your key is one deterrent. You know, another deterrent is possibly if you have, I'm struggling on this name, but you remember they used to have the little sliding locks on the top of your doors.
Yeah.
New York. Yeah. So it's like a little chain on there.
Yep.
You know, that's another deterrent, because even if you had a key, if you had one of those on your door, then you're still going to have to try and, you know, kind of bump your way in.
Yeah.
You know, and then depending on what you're trying to safeguard, let's just say somebody wanted money and you had a bunch of money at your house. The second safeguard might be a safe. So you're just setting up multiple things in place, so it's going to be harder for somebody to acquire what they're trying to get to.
Yeah.
So you think about the same thing in terms of what I just mentioned, the password, making it so that you have to actually plug into the device to get into. Even if they were able to get to your device, you know, your second default will be your password. So let's just say they were even able to plug up to that device. If they don't have the password and it's not a common password, they're still not going to be able to get into it. So you just want to start thinking about deterrence as opposed to it's just one all-inclusive thing that's going to prevent people from getting into my network. There's no way that you're going to have one thing that's going to prevent somebody from getting into your network. You have to set up multiple deterrents to prevent them from getting into whatever you're trying to get into. So
no, man, that's a great metaphor you use, man, because, you know, much like our homes, you know, our internet, I mean, obviously the router sits in our home, but I mean, I think that's a way that anybody could kind of like just conceptualize, okay, because I think it's intimidating for most to try to figure out, you know, what's that all-in-one security solution. Essentially what I'm hearing with that last point is it's less about an all-in-one, but just taking some of the small steps to make sure that it's more difficult for somebody to get to your information.
Absolutely.
Versus trying to figure out a way to stop it completely. I mean,
absolutely.
That's really good, man. So just to recap, it was 1, change your password. 2, make sure that your router is set up so that you can only access it by plugging into it.
Mm-hmm.
The bonus I remember was, what you just mentioned around setting up deterrents. What was number 3 again?
So number 3 generally is, okay, so we'll go through it. So we'll have the password, making sure that you can only access it via, we didn't even get to that. Thank you, Bobby. You set me back on track. That third one actually that I was going to mention is making sure that your wireless is not broadcasted. So you might hear of like your name, right? So your name might be My Network. You can name something funny like I don't know. I love Seinfeld. It's a good show. I don't love it, but we're just making up anything.
Right.
So I love Seinfeld is your actual network name. So when you go in there and you see all these wireless networks available, you see I love Seinfeld. So what you want to do is turn that off, and that's also in that same access information that we discussed by going through your internet browser, and you can change it so it's not showing. So. And the reason why I brought it up to say that you want to think about deterrence is because some may believe that just because it's not broadcasted, that nobody can see it. That's not true. Again, there's no all-in-one deterrent.
Yeah.
Now, most everyday people will not be able to see it, but there are ways that you can see those network names, or what they call them as SSIDs. But I'm trying to kind of stay away from,
the terms.
Yeah, the terms, because you may not know what that is, but it's going to be your network name, so that when you click on wireless networks, and when you have your mobile device and you see wireless networks, that's your name. But all of those names are not being broadcasted, so you may not see them. So that's a deterrent, because those that may not be as knowledgeable may not be able to find those names that aren't broadcasted. So it again provides additional safeguards.
Right.
So that, you have all these safeguards in place. So once they get past one, okay, well, now you need more knowledge. They may not have that, or they might just get tired. Like I said, we're all human. If it becomes more difficult, why not just go for the ones that's easier?
That's easy. Right. So get in and get out.
Exactly.
That's perfect, man. And that would be another setting. So, I mean, just, wow, first 5 minutes, man, I got 2 things I want to go and knock out as soon as I get home. Because I think, those are things that, your average person just doesn't know about. I thought that, you had to broadcast. I didn't even know that there was an option to not broadcast your network. I thought it was necessary so that you could connect to it. So let's touch on that then.
Okay.
If my network or my SSID is not broadcasted, how then do I connect to it, to initiate a wireless connection?
That's a good question, Bob. Yeah. So what you'll have to do, and I say this for everyone, you want to make sure that if you do not broadcast that you remember exactly what that is. Because you can always change that as well. You can change it to, like I said, you can say, I love Seinfeld, I love, I don't know, Monk. You can name it whatever you want to name it.
Sure.
And make sure that you know exactly what that is called. There are ways around it. You can always, reset it. You can call your internet provider. You can do all of that, but you don't really want to go down that road. But what you're going to do is, when you go on your most devices, whether it be your computer, whether it be your mobile device, they'll ask you, do you want to connect to an unknown network? Or different devices have different ways they call it, but hidden network is the most common. So it's do you want to connect to a hidden network? So that hidden network, you'll ask you what that name is, and you provide that name that you either renamed it or the default. And once you put that name in, then you're going to be asked for your password, the same way you would have been before if you did not hide it. So that's how you access it. You'll just click on the field that says hidden network, whether it be on your computer or mobile device, and it'll be in the same area that you pull up when it says, here are your available wireless networks. You'll just click on that hidden network and then type in that name, and then you'll be able to connect to it just the same.
Man, that's a key. That is a major key. I'm doing that as soon as I get home, man. Yeah. I mean, just this week, I ran into an issue. I think we talked about this with kind of like the whole bandwidth piece. and I unplugged my personal cloud from my router, and then my traffic picked back up. Logged into my router last night, and my files are missing. Now, I don't think I got hacked. I think it has something to do with the file system, because it said that the file system wasn't clean, so it probably isn't able to kind of recognize files and where they're placed.
Right.
But even yet and still, it definitely like raised my ears, like, oh man, like I wonder if my security has been breached, because I literally couldn't access anything. So I ran a check, and I was able to kind of see, you know, the majority of the files. Some of them are still kind of nested in there, so I don't think it's fully resolved. But to your point, man, as best we can, we want to make sure that we set up those deterrents to keep to just keep the things that that matter most to us.
Right.
To us.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, absolutely.
So to that point, when you think about, I think this is something that most people probably don't understand too. Like, you know, when you're looking for an internet service provider, everybody's throwing out all these speeds, right? You know, we can get you 100 Mbps and, you know, so on and so forth. Let's start at the basics. When network or internet service providers are publishing those speeds, what's the unit of measure? And then how can somebody distinguish one from another? Like, which one is better?
It's a good question. So I'll say this, and there are two things I want to make on this point.
Okay.
So whenever a service provider, you know, gives you any type of speeds, 100 megabits per second, whether it be now you hear fiber or 1,000 megabits per second, the first thing that you want to ask yourself is, are you primarily using any of your devices via Wi-Fi, which is probably the most common now, or whether that's actually plugged in through an actual cable? The reason why that is important is because if they say, let's say 1,000 megabits per second, you are not going to get 1,000 megabits per second via Wi-Fi.
Right.
It's not going to happen. Absolutely not going to happen.
Yeah.
So now, the only way you're going to get even close to that is via cable. And even at that, you're not going to get, I'll probably strongly say you will not get 1,000 megabits per second. You might get 855, you might get, if you're lucky, you might get 899. I highly doubt it. But the other important part about that is whether or not your cable and or your device is capable of accepting speeds to that point.
Wow.
So, you know, you have to make sure that whatever, and the reason why it all goes back to standards. So the cable that you often see, whether it be at home or whether it be at work, there are standards on how much that cable, how much data or how many megabits per second can go through that cable. So all this really points back to what is capable for your device, whether it be router or whatever it may be. And usually when it comes from an ISP or your internet service provider is capable of accepting that. But so it all comes back to, one, how are you going to be connecting to that device? What the device is your home going to be connected to? Because, and actually the other point to that, and this might be jumping, Bobby, I'm not trying to push.
No, you're good, man. Give it to them.
But the other important thing is how many devices in your home are connected to your internet. Because at the end of the day, for the most of us, you are sharing a connection amongst the people around you, unless maybe if you're somewhere, you know, a little bit more isolated, like, you know, you're out more in the country here in Georgia. If you're, you know, where the homes are a little bit farther spaced apart,
right,
a space farther apart, you might be lucky. You know, I won't even say this because usually you're going to be sharing connections. So that's why nowadays, when you have everyone working from home, you may have a little bit of trouble connecting at times when you may not have in the past, because we're all home. Because if we're all on at the same time, you'll find it's just going to be a little bit harder to connect and stream or whatever we're trying to do, because we're all sharing that 100 megabit per second or 1,000 megabit per second connection.
Right.
So, you know, you have to keep those things in mind. If you, in terms of how to make it better for yourself, I'd say you want to, and it depends on, you know, I'm married, you know, and for those who have kids, you can't tell them to get off the internet, especially not now.
Right.
But you want to limit the devices that, you know, may not necessarily need a connection. So if you know, during the workday, if you're not really using Netflix, or if you're not really using that Apple TV, you could possibly disconnect it, like literally disconnect it, unplug it, whatever it is, because you always have to keep in mind that even though you're not using that device, if that device is connected, it's going to be getting updates. So it's pulling from that 100 megabit, that 1,000 megabit per second connection. So all these things, you just have to keep in mind how many things are connected. I think that's the number one thing you want to do if you want to have the most amount of bandwidth, if you will, most amount of, streaming power, to put it in more layman's terms. So
that makes perfect sense. And I think for the average listener too, it's like, and just to kind of, I guess, connect the dots, what I'm hearing from you is essentially that number that is being promoted, there's several different factors that play into it, but when you hear the term bandwidth, that's what they're referring to.
Right.
And by bandwidth is the amount of data that can be transferred over that network connection per second.
Absolutely.
Is that an accurate representation?
That is perfect. That's you put it very good. Very good. Very, very plainly laid out. Absolutely. Yeah. Bandwidth is just the amount of data that can be pushed. You can think about it like power, on a car, horsepower, if you will.
Right.
So it's just how much data can be pushed over that connection. And, that number, while, the buzzword now is fiber, if you're talking about AT&T, I mean, fiber is usually a term for most of them, but that is being pushed a lot nowadays. And it is, I'd say, for wireless connections, if you're doing like 1,000 megabit per second, depending on what you have going on, you might be able to get 200-300 megabits per second over wireless signal. So all that is based on how many devices you have, because each one of those devices are pulling from that bandwidth, or that capability to push so many megabits per second. So all of those devices, and usually without any type of filter, i.e. going through your router, your gateway, and changing and modifying which one has more authority. That's a whole other subject, whole nother, school of thought.
Sure.
So without doing all that, each of them are usually they're selfish, if you will. Every one of those devices is going to say, no, I want this. I want this bandwidth. So without any type of filter, you'll find yourself, well, hey, why can't I get a good Zoom call? What's going on? Why am I having interruptions? Why is my internet getting kicked off? Anything like that. So you just have to be careful in terms of, what you have on your network. And when it comes to which one is better, there's so many different ways to really describe which one is better. It also depends on where you're located. It also depends on how far away from that actual main connection for your provider is. Yeah. So if you're in the rural part of Georgia, if you're out in, somewhere way out in Georgia, you may find yourself having more difficulty, connecting because you're so far away from that main station. So it all just depends. You'd have to really go and kind of just do your research and just kind of try, which one you feel like has the best connection and the most reliability.
Good stuff. So if I'm so we've talked a bit about, so I think we've covered kind of the foundational pieces from a security standpoint. We've covered the foundational pieces with respect to networking. I want to kind of build another layer on top of that networking foundation. Now that we know kind of what it means in terms of how data is transferred, what bandwidth means, things you need to consider when we're thinking about devices, and the number of devices that are connected to it. One of the things that I think most people really don't understand too, I want to drill into something you said, is making sure that not just the devices, like the actual personal devices that we're using, are able to sustain that bandwidth, but it's also like the router, right? So if you don't have a router or modem that was given to you, I guess a router really, that was given to you by the service provider. Mm-hmm. If I'm shopping, right, what are some of the things that I need to look for? This is on the box that will let me know that I'm, coming in hot, that I have, basically the most current protocol with respect to that network piece.
Gotcha. So that's a good question. Very good question. So nowadays, especially so they have like Wi-Fi 6 that has
Okay.
come out. So we have another standard of Wi-Fi in terms of now that goes into the piece of increasing security, increasing encryption standards. So it now makes you more safe. So you want to look for that support for Wi-Fi 6. You'll hear a whole lot of 8.0 protocols when you see that. 802 AC, which is, more of a stronger way of getting data through. So, you're going to want to look for that. You also want to look for what devices that you can have that will allow you to customize it. So, before we even get to that point, I'll say you want to make sure it's compatible with your ISP, because if you're going to purchase a personal router, you also want to make sure that you know how to, and if it's possible, to connect that device to your ISP. Because what you don't want to have is, this personal router at your house, and now it makes everything work in your house, but now you can't reach your provider. So now that makes everything kind of pointless, because now you can't connect to Google, you can't connect to Netflix or whatever you're trying to stream to. But the most important things you want to look for is whether or not it has Wi-Fi 6, whether or not it has the correct 8.0. There's so many 801, 802 AC, and all those different things. But you want to make sure those are the biggest protocols on there. And the reason why that matters to you is, especially for Wi-Fi 6, is because you want to make sure you have the most capability to receive those higher bandwidth speeds that you desire. You also want to make sure those encryption standards are at the most up-to-date level, so that all the different, security threats that we have coming out, that, you're capable of, assessing that, capable of being in the best possible state, firmware-wise. So firmware, in terms of what that means, is kind of like, what Windows 10 or Mac OS, High Sierra, whatever you're using, is to software. So you want to make sure those updates are continually provided. Whether you want to do that personally, or whether you want to have an auto update, but you always want to make sure that you have the most recent device that's capable of receiving those firmware updates that will allow you to be in the best place in terms of being protected from the newest threats. So when you're looking for those devices, you just want to make sure that, one, that it has the latest calls, like Wi-Fi 6 and all those other different terms that you might possibly see, and also that you have a device that is capable of being accessible to your provider. So, your Xfinities, your AT&Ts, or whatnot. So, because if you buy a personal device, you also have to make sure that pretty much most of them are plug and play. So you're literally just going to take the cable, plug it up to that device, up to your gateway or whatnot. Or you can actually purchase your own gateway. So when you hear the terms router and gateway, your gateway is pretty much from your ISP, which is somewhat of a mix between a gateway, a router, and your switch. They simply combined it into one device to make it easy.
Okay.
So it's pretty much the same thing in terms of just terms. Your router and your gateway are kind of synonymous as it comes to your ISP. You can always purchase a singular router, like literally just a router. And there are use cases for that for most, common everyday people. It's not really important unless you just are planning to actually have a bunch of devices at your home, or you're coming up with some type of lab that you want to test against.
Right.
Normally a gateway is pretty much all you need.
Okay.
And the same terms that I kind of mentioned before in terms of router would apply to that gateway as well. Wi-Fi 6 and security and things of that nature. Got you.
No, that's good, man. And I think, because you're right, the terms are just kind of used so interchangeably. It's very easy to get confused. I think, another piece that people probably will want to hear more about is, the difference between WEP and WPA. Like obviously those are like, I mean, to them, this is most of us, it's just an acronym, right?
Right.
But when you think about, this from a security perspective, is one stronger than the other, or is there a preferred approach to make sure that your stuff is most secure?
Yes. I will say, there for the most part, WPA tends to be the hot one on the bench. Usually these things are kind of automatically deferred when you buy any devices. Usually kind of defaults to the strongest protocol.
Right.
But pretty much encryption. Like, well, I'd say I'll put it to you this way. Both are important. It just depends on what we're talking about.
Okay.
But when it comes to WPA, you want to make sure that I would, for most average people, I would just say that you want to go with the default.
Yeah.
Because when you start manipulating and going through, different channels and changing one thing or another, you have to realize that may kind of be a domino effect.
Yeah.
But you want to just make sure you have the strongest encryption. Each of those terms are important because of the encryption piece. Because and kind of to take away some of the shadowing or the misnomer behind encryption. Encryption is kind of one of those deterrents that I was talking about.
Gotcha.
It's kind of like a file, right? You have a file that is just, you think about Windows or Mac, you can just double click on that file. And that file is named exactly what that file is. If it's, let's just say social security number. If it's social security number, it has your name and your social security number. When you encrypt it, then that file could be, any number of different things aside from whatever that file is called.
Yeah.
So then it makes it harder for somebody trying to get into it. And in this case, you're talking about your wireless protection. So it makes it harder for them to determine your password. It makes it harder for them to determine what they're looking at from a hacker or from a malicious standpoint. So
Yeah.
That's where those terms come in, the WPA, the WEP, all those different things. That's where that comes. It just comes into encryption and authentication standards.
Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No worries. So I would just say when it comes to what to accept, usually, for the most part nowadays, the higher standard will automatically be chosen for you. So I would usually just stay away from, I would stay away from modifying that unless you really know what you're doing. Yeah. Otherwise, you start opening yourself up for, being vulnerable, if you will.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think something that you just said too, kind of transitioning to the plight of the business owner, right? If I'm a business leader, if I'm somebody who is working from home, and I think for the sake of this conversation, I think I probably lean more to your small business owner. So these are folks who don't have the benefit of an enterprise security team,
right?
Or somebody who is, monitoring activity, in a data center and that kind of thing. These are folks who are leading a team of, 4 or 5, maybe even 10 people who are just working from, either company provided or personal laptops, over their home network. And they're wanting to make sure that the information that they're transmitting, whether it be customer or client information, whether it be, internal information, you mentioned encryption. To what degree, with just your given that premise, if you will, to what degree is encryption already baked in? And if it's not, what are some simple measures that a business owner or leader can take to make sure that the work that's being done within their small teams is safe?
So that's a very good question. I will say that when it comes to a work, whether it be small, medium, or large, I'll just stick with the small to medium.
Sure.
The number one thing that you want to do is you're gonna want to start getting to the range of firewalls, and VPNs. Firewalls, now from a small business perspective, there are kind of, there are different things. And when I say firewall, let's just be clear. No shout out to Windows. This is really what I'll say this just to be politically correct. Most devices, especially most software, when we talk about, say, Microsoft Windows, whether we say, Mac OS, most of them come with firewalls.
Okay.
But this has been my expertise and my knowledge over the years. When you talk about something in terms of security, there are things that kind of happen to have security, but from a business perspective, I don't want to buy something or have something that just happens to have anything. I want to have something that is the sole purpose of whatever this is to do said thing.
Got it.
For security, I want to have a dedicated VPN or virtual private network. I want to have a dedicated firewall. So while Windows may come with one, while Mac may have one, you want to protect yourself the best and the most reliably.
Man, that's good.
I will say, you want to purchase a firewall, or even, they're open source things, so you have something you can download. But even that would be a dedicated firewall or VPN. And so, there are multiple out there. Every a vendor may have one. Cisco, being the king in the networking space, may have one. So which one you want to choose, it really just depends on your own research or your collaboration with a different vendor. But I'll say when it comes to securing, you want to have a firewall first and foremost.
Yeah.
You want to have a firewall because
now for the people at home, what is a firewall like?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just another deterrent that's installed on the workstation? Like essentially just, and I guess in layman's terms, what is a firewall?
So a firewall, you kind of think about it like I'll probably put it to you. I won't use that term. I'll just say, think about it like a door, right?
Okay.
Your front door, your garage door, whatever it is. And I'll use the key scenario. So you have a key to your garage door, your front door. That key has been specifically made for that door. And if you happen to have one of those homes or if you even put it, you install it that way, your garage door may have a different key than your front door, or your back door may have a different key than your front and your garage door. But either way, that key and that lock were specifically made for each other. So what a firewall does is says, whatever you put in place. So if you put a specific configuration in place to say, I want only people coming from this particular area to be able to reach this destined area. So now if somebody comes from somewhere else, if someone says, hey, I'm coming from Egypt, I'm coming from Germany, wherever it may be, they try and access anywhere of your network, it's going to say, no, I don't recognize you. You're not on the list of people that I say are accepted. So to put it in the same metaphor, this key doesn't look like it's made for this lock. So I'm not going to allow you to unlock this door. I.e., you're not going to get into my home. You're not going to get into wherever it is that you were trying to get into, because this was not made for you. This is not what I was configured to accept. So, with that same analogy, that you're right, Bobby, that's just the deterrent. You don't rely on a firewall. And, just in my years of expertise, I want to make this clear. There's no all-inclusive solution to security. That's like saying there's an all-inclusive way of keeping your car running. Like if I change my tires, then my car is going to run. No, that's not the way it works. There are so many different steps to keep your car running. And there's so many different steps to securing your network. There's so many different steps to keeping, bandwidth or the flow of information reliable. So again, it's just a deterrent.
No, that's good, man. And so now you were in the process of also sharing. So there was the firewall, but then there was was it antivirus? What was the second thing that you had mentioned?
So VPN. So a VPN, right. So a VPN is more of a tunnel situation. So think about, let's say we set up a firewall for, those different networks. And so now you're saying, okay, well, I don't want to necessarily open up a firewall per se, but I want to, or better yet, I don't have a actual connection in my current setup for people coming from here. So you can set up a tunnel or virtual private network to kind of open up a pathway into that. So if you use the same door situation, back door, front door, garage door, we're going to create a tunnel to access this network, which each one of those, that VPN also has certain security in mind to only allow, it'll be two-sided. It'll be a firewall issue to say I'm opening up a route or a connection from this virtual private network I made to my network, but it's only going to be a small tunnel. Just think about any other tunnel. It's not wide. It's just a little, kind of a break in whatever I have. So you're creating a underground tunnel, if you will, or any type of tunnel. You're just creating kind of a small opening for only these things to be able to get by. But that also has security measures in a way that will allow only certain people, only certain things through this tunnel. So either one of those, solutions could be made so that you're not just opening up your network or opening up whatever you have in your small business, medium business, home, whatever it may be, to, vulnerabilities. So which you choose, it kind of depends on you. I would always say that the firewall is important, but a firewall only, it just prevents and allows certain traffic, whereas the VPN provides a specific opening for you to be able to access, different things.
Gotcha.
Those two things are probably the most critical. Firewall being, near and dear to my heart. That is the biggest way to offer yourself protection against, certain threats. And nowadays, you have so many different firewall solutions that are available to you. Some simple, some more complex. But either way, those are two of the best devices, I would say, in terms of a small business, which will be critical to protecting yourself.
I think in one way, as you were kind of talking about it, a way that kind of made sense to me in terms of distinguishing one from the other. Mm-hmm. You think about it like, going to the club, right?
Right.
The firewall is the bouncer.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
No, you can get in. You don't meet the dress code. You
right.
through that kind of thing. But the VPN is not a preventative measure. The VPN is just the door for VIP. So those who know that it's there will know to go around the back, knock twice, and, scratch and sniff, and they'll get in. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That's a good point. I like
so
that.
So it's not, while they both serve the purpose of, protecting, your infrastructure, if you will, they're different in the way that a firewall is truly a preventative measure. The VPN is just a more discreet form of access, if you will, for people who are trying to get in the door. Absolutely. Is that accurate?
It is. I love that scenario. I love that, by the way. Yeah, definitely. That's very accurate. Very, very accurate.
Okay.
You definitely bring up a good point in terms of being able to walk around, knock twice, sniff, or whatever it may be. It definitely does lead some, there's always vulnerabilities, and some you may want to deal with, some you don't want to deal with. But that was a good scenario.
Where would you suggest people? Do you have any preferred, brands or places where somebody, if they were looking to install a VPN for their company or to install a firewall on their workstation, do you have any recommendations?
In terms of VPN, like I said, there are so many different vendors. I've used PryTunnel. So, to spelling will be literally like pry, like I'm trying to pry something open, and then tunnel, but just TUNL, not the actual. But PryTunnel, I think, is a very solid VPN solution. Very good, very reliable. Somewhat customizable, but I think all in all, that is a very good solution. More so on the open source side.
Gotcha.
In terms of firewall, I'm a Linux guy. I'll tell you that. I definitely prefer Linux. Just, the open source aspect of it is really amazing in my opinion. And, pretty much Linux runs the world anyway. So in terms of servers and how the internet is constructed. But I'll say there's a whole lot of open source firewall solutions. And, if you're talking about a medium, especially small, not so much on the small side, but I'll definitely say medium to large, you're going to have to deal with Linux. So Linux has a lot of open source firewall solutions. So I'll just start there with something called SureWall. So shore, like, you're on the shore of a beach.
Yep.
And then wall, like, literally your four walls in your home. So shore wall. That is a very good firewall solution in terms of on the Linux side, if you're on that arena. So those two things are one of the best that I've encountered throughout my period of being in this industry.
Okay.
If you're talking about a firewall solution in terms of like one of the big boys, Cisco has a Cisco ASA, literally ASA, so Alpha, Sierra Alpha. And then you also have Juniper, which has a firewall solution. Juniper's the other kind of in the same realm of Cisco, so they're definitely equal competitors.
Gotcha.
You have something called an SRX.
SRX, okay.
Correct. Those are very good, solid firewall solutions. Whichever one you want kind of depends on you and what's important to you, and
Right.
how, which one you want to choose. But I think those are two of those. There are others. I guess I'll throw another one out there also. You have what you would call a FortiGate. So FORTI gate, like literally a gate.
Okay.
That is another good solution. Again, it just depends on which one is more important to you. So these are three of probably the best that I would say that's out there in terms of some of the big boys, big vendors. There are definitely others. You do your research, you can find others out there. My personal or my opinion of a firewall solution or any type of device that you want to choose, I'll say it this way. It's kind of like when you deal with, I'll use phones for an analogy, right? Two of the biggest phones are, vendors of phones you're going to have is Samsung and Apple. You can always find other phone solutions out there, but, you're going to struggle when it comes to support.
Yeah.
Because most of the time when you have, large names out there, they have the most support when it comes to new apps, when it comes to new solutions out there. Apple and Samsung are going to get them because that's, some of the largest providers of phones out nowadays.
Right.
So now you can go to other solutions that aren't necessarily so popular, but when it comes to supporting, when it comes to integrating it with different parts of your network from a small to medium-sized business perspective, you're going to struggle sometimes depending on, which vendor you choose, because now you're not going to get the most support.
Right.
And then also, when it comes to support plans, if you're talking about Cisco, you're going to have a lot of support options out there. When you're talking about Juniper, you're going to have support options out there. And also FortiGate, you're going to have support options out there. The struggle with having open source firewall solutions, like I mentioned on Linux side, is that you're probably going to have some type of knowledge of those type of applications, whether it be on your team or whether you have consultants that kind of can work with you to maneuver those different things. Because when it comes to installing things like SureWall, I'm gonna tell you from personal experience, if you don't know what you're doing,
man,
and you make the wrong move, then it's gonna be a bad. Yeah, it's gonna be a wrap. Exactly, it's gonna be a bad day for you.
Yeah.
And then firewalls are very good at what they do. That's why I recommend them for dedicated versus it so happens to have it. There are ways around a Windows firewall. There are ways around a Mac, a Mac firewall, but there are very little ways. Around
for something that's dedicated. Man, that's right. So good. That's so good. And for those who are listening or watching, I'll be sure to put links to all of the things that Kamal has mentioned in the notes or comments so that you guys can dig into this stuff for yourself. Kamal, this is gold, man.
Appreciate it.
As a former IT guy, my mind is blown about the things. I'm like, man, we didn't cover that in class. So I have some stuff that I need to take on myself to make sure that, me and mine are protected as well. Before we wrap up, man, are there any closing thoughts that you want to leave with the audience?
Absolutely. Well, number one, Bobby, I appreciate you for bringing me on. It's been a pleasure. I love, just talking and, just spreading and, providing knowledge to others. I will say, kind of what we touched on, just, from the ground up, I'll say, from a regular residential, I'm just at my home perspective.
Sure.
I definitely want to, give everyone the guidance to say that whenever you're doing anything, nowadays we're on COVID, quarantine.
Sure.
But once we start picking back up and we're traveling, going from different places, you know, like I said, it's nothing wrong with handwriting anything, you know, and I only mention this because I know from personal experience,
Yeah, man.
you know, writing things down, and when it comes to passwords, I know we commonly just have an idea, especially with everything being online now, we have, you know, more passwords than we care to even mention. But, you know, I just want to garner everyone to, you know, kind of, you know, deter away from having just common passwords, because what you don't want to do in being around and, you know, talking with different people as we start to travel, you know, is to having the same password for everything. Because as great as that is, and for ease of use as that is, you know, what you'll have is if someone does happen to compromise a password, now they have the kings of the kingdom. And, you know, and in my opinion, just like we don't, you know, I don't want to make it easier for anyone to, you know, for me to get God if I'm out in terms of like just money, for physical, monetary purposes. You know, we wouldn't go around walking around with a bunch of cash in our hands, just walking around, you know, the neighborhood, because you're opening yourself up.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
Right. You know, you don't want, there's no need to floss all that. You know, just keep it home, keep it safe. You know, nobody needs to know what you have.
For sure.
So in the same perspective, you know, we're out, and once this quarantine is not so much, you know, a thing, you know, still keep the same mentality as we do in the quarantine, you know.
Sure.
Make sure to protect yourself in terms of, you know, what your passwords are, in terms of, you know, mobile. And I think that's one thing we didn't really hit on, you know, and this is a closing thought, but I would say mobile is where it's at right now, right? You know, we use our phones and our tablets for so many different things. So I guess the one thing that we didn't really harp on too much is, you know, security on your mobile devices. There are things and applications that you can also purchase for, you know, mobile devices, right? You know, because that's really what we are nowadays. You know, you don't always have a laptop. And
That's right.
the thing about not having a laptop and using tablets and phones is that security, while again dedicated versus it so happens to have it. Your phone has, you know, security things in place, but you know, you can always have something. And there are other solutions out there, but I'll say like Trend Micro has mobile security. You know, I'm not really, no, I won't say that. I mean, politically correct. I'll just say that there, you know, there are multiple vendors out there. Trend Micro, Trend, literally like a trend, and Micro, like something microscopic.
Yeah.
They have mobile security solutions out there as well that you can install on your phones and tablets. And so that's important because when we're going out, you know, even at home, or whether we're, you know, once the quarantine kind of dies down, or, you know, we get into a new normal, you want to make sure your mobile devices are also secure. Don't just think about your laptops, because nowadays, and as we continue to grow and, you know, technology gets even, you know, more, you know, varied.
Yeah.
We're going to use our mobile devices a lot for many different
That's right. That's right.
So you want to make, and to be honest with you, most of us have a lot of secure, you know, things and files on our phones. So make sure to protect those devices as well. Don't steer away from that, because, you know, I know I was talking to my wife about this the other day. If you ever want to know how, you know, manly or how strong someone is, let them lose their phone.
Man.
Let them lose their phone. I promise you, their true character will come out. You know?
Will come shining through. You better believe it. You know what, man? You actually just highlighted something. I think we need to do a part 2, and we'll focus solely on mobile. Because I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. I think that most of us, me self-included, we believe that we're, you know, pretty much subject to whatever, you know, Apple or Samsung or whoever provides us with the device, not really taking into account that there are some other third-party things that we could probably bolt on to make sure that our information is protected.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, cool. Let's lock it in, man. I am going to conclude this. Kamal, thank you so much for your time today, your expertise, and for taking the time to kind of share your wisdom with us. This has been gold. I know I have a long checklist of things now that I need to go and do, and I hope you listeners do as well. And stay tuned for part 2 of this, where we'll dig into mobile security, all right? Without any more, Business Done Better. This is episode, I don't know what, but we're reporting live from the COVID. Enjoy yourself.
All right. Thanks, Bobby. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.